All right, we're hopping straight into it today. This is part 3 of the dining room, and although it's not technically done because we will be changing out the floors and probably getting a new table and stuff, I'm gonna do a big before and after at the end, and you're not gonna wanna miss it because it is such a huge transformation. But we're starting out with putting liquid masking on the windows. I just prefer this. It goes a lot more quickly than painter's tape in my opinion. You just paint a thick layer on. When you're done, you just score it and peel it right off. Just make sure that you go with a thick enough layer because if you put it on too thin, it can be a little difficult to get off. But I am painting the windows in here black, just like I did in the sunroom. These two rooms do join together. They're like basically one long room, and you'll see that kind of in a minute. So it felt very cohesive to do these windows black. Now this window is it is real wood, and the next window that you're about to see is actually fake like plastic wood. And also, yes, I did have like a tarp over the window. It's because our stucco is still getting worked on, like right outside that window. Anyway, this window is like a plastic. Actually, all over the house, they had replaced windows here and there, and like none of them are the same. It's very not cohesive. But yeah, there was no way I could just leave that other window wood because they looked different, and like this is clearly plastic. I don't know. Moving on. As you can see, it is joined to the sunroom like I just mentioned, which if you guys haven't seen that transformation, I will leave it linked here. It's such a good one. But I am just painting the other side of this trim white, so it all flows together. Now onto the window trim, like the casing of it, I am painting that white as well. Again, to be cohesive with the sunroom. I did consider doing it the same green that I did the wainscoting in, but then I was like, I don't think it would really, I don't know. I just felt like it would be better white. It is kind of contrasting against that green, but it helps it flow more with like the rest of the house. So yeah, that's what I did. And I did multiple coats, but I'm only gonna show you guys one coat. Normally, 3 coats on wood trim does best for me. And then I also painted the trim on the outside of the door to the laundry room because it's kind of connected into the area. Now I didn't go ahead and like paint fully through to the kitchen. I probably should have, and please ignore the mess on my countertops. But for now, this is gonna stay like this, and I have a big plan for this door, so stay tuned. But after I was done painting everything, it was time to reupholster these crusty red diner seats. So this had a little like finishing edge on the trim, so I tried to pull all of the staples out and then pull that off. Now this took forever and my wrists were literally crying. So I was like, you know what? Let's just like work smarter, not harder. I'm cutting the rest of this off. We'll pull out the staples that we need to, but the rest are staying because frankly, I was not going to spend like 10 to 12 hours getting all of the staples out of every single cushion that I had to reupholster. So pulled off, and I was a little bit surprised, I guess, at like the foam that was in there. I expected it more to be foam, but it was kind of like falling apart, if I'm being honest. And then I also did the same thing. I took my X-Acto knife and just used that to score around so that I could just pull the fabric off, and it was very floofy in there. So I was getting anxious. I was like, I just really want to see one of these covered because, you know, I had this idea for many weeks, and I was just excited to finally do it. So I laid out my fabric. I used some crystals to hold it on the other end there, and then I laid out all of my pieces that I needed to reupholster, and I measured with my heart because I didn't actually want to measure it's just not something I like to do. And then I cut it, and I just hope that it all worked out. And you know what? It did, so that's okay. Then I'm taking the other fabric that I have left over and cutting out my pieces for the little back cushions. Now, to keep what was already there intact and just like held together a little bit better, I purchased some cotton batting, and then I used my staple gun to go ahead and staple it on. That kind of just helped keep everything together and cohesive. And then I cut the excess off. I just made sure that everything was pulled really tight when I did this, and that there was no like little lumps in there. Now I'm going to be doing the same thing with my fabric. I chose to go with a velvet fabric because I just like it. And I thought it was cute. So I do one side first, and then I'm pulling the other side very, very tightly and stapling it up. Now, I'm not going to lie, the corners on this were a little bit difficult just because it is such a thick fabric, and I was like getting turned around and a little bit confused, and I wanted to make sure that everything looked really good. But you know, eventually we got it, and we stapled them down. Now, if you're going to take on a reupholstering project, I highly recommend that you get an electric stapler versus like a hand stapler. It will save your hands. Even though my hands were still crying after this project, they would have been a lot worse if I went with a hand stapler, because trust me, I used both before. And then I was just really excited. We finally had one cushion down, so I plopped it in, and it looked so good. Then it was on to the first back cushion. Now, there were those little buttons there before, and so I had to just fill in the little holes with some polyfill because I wanted a more modern kind of look. And this actually did work very, very well. So filled those in, and then I put the batting over it to, again, hold it all together and make sure that, you know, it stayed in and in place while I was upholstering it. So I just kind of like tucked that and then flipped it over really quickly and did the same thing that I did with the first cushion, and I just stapled all on one side with the batting, and then I cut the excess off because there was kind of a lot of excess on this one, and then I did the same thing to the other side. Then I just repeated the same exact process as I did with the first bottom cushion, and I tightly put the fabric in with staples on one side, pulled it extremely taut, and I started from the middle and worked my way out. I found that this was the best way to keep everything even. You are especially going to want to do this if your fabric has a pattern, just because you don't want it to get like lopsided. For some reason, the corners on the like top cushions were a lot easier for me to do. Maybe it's because I had a little experience with the first one, or maybe it was just because there wasn't as much fabric. Now, I cut off the red fabric from the longer cushion, and I cut the batting to size. Now, I did do the end of this one first instead of the sides, just because it was like really falling apart there, and I wanted to make sure I could still reach my hand in and kind of form it so it wasn't like a lumpy little cushion, if that makes sense. And then it was time to just, again, do the same thing. And I do wish that I would have had a work surface that was as long as my project. That did make it a little bit more difficult. So if you're going to take on a project like this, I would highly recommend maybe even just like doing it on the floor. I probably should have shifted to that at some point, especially when I had these two longer pieces for the longer side of the bench, but you know, I don't know why, I kept going on the table, so it was like kind of rocking back and forth a little bit, but you know what, we got it done, and that's all that matters. I did have a little bit more trouble getting this cushion in than the first one, and I think it was just there was a little bit more fabric, but eventually I pushed it down and the bench is already looking so much better. Now we're at the second back piece, the longer one. Oh guys, this one, I was over it at this point, and I was like, I'm just gonna rip this off. So I ripped that little trim piece off and I pulled the staples out. Honestly, this was a much more effective way to do it, so highly recommend. And then I just cut the rest of the fabric off. Again, filled in those little, like, where the buttons were, the buttonholes, with some polyfill and covered it in batting. Now, I didn't think initially that the batting would be necessary, but I do highly recommend it. It was very helpful, especially if you're wanting to just reuse the, like, fill on the cushion that you already have. This one was a little bit more difficult because I didn't quite cut it big enough, but that's okay, we got it to work. And since I couldn't drill through the little buttonholes to like secure it back up, I just used 3M strips, and honestly, it's holding up really well. I did use my leveler just to make sure everything was level and good to go, and it's been up for quite a while now, and we haven't had any issues with the 3M strips holding, and we use this area like every single day. We took the old crusty light down, and I had replaced it with a different one that I'm about to show you from Amazon, but I wasn't loving it. So I ordered this one. Now, this was a little bit odd to put together. It wasn't difficult by any means, like it was very straightforward, but I had just never put a light together like this. Because I had to put all the little wires in those little thingies. I don't know how to describe it to you, but you can see what I'm doing there. It wasn't hard though. You guys could definitely do it, and for the price, totally worth it. This was under $100, which is really a steal for a light fixture this big. And also it was just really beautiful. It was very easy to install. I had a little bit of trouble with getting the little junction box to fit, but that wasn't because of the light. It was just because of how they had installed the junction box like into our ceiling. So I did have to cut just like a little piece of the drywall away to make it work, but you know what? It got done and it looks so much better. Now I'm bringing my marble tiered shelf into here, and I'm gonna make a little functional but beautiful area. So excited about that. And of course, I had to add throw pillows to the bench because we need this to be a comfy, cozy place to sit. After the last pillow was karate chopped, it was time to bring back in the dining room table. Now I do plan on replacing this with a little bit larger of a table and adding some chairs, but until I find some that I like and that fit the space, I put some ottomans in here for some additional seating, and then it was time to style this shelf. When I'm styling, I try to make it a mixture of functional and beautiful items, so that's what I did here. And you guys, it's really coming together. We still need to redo the floors, but we're gonna be doing those in the entire house, and that's coming very soon. But for now, here are the before and afters.